Since the trigger is a very important functionality and we changed it a little bit from 2.0 to 2.1, I want to show you what we actually changed. A lot of the information I have told you is still valid from the 2.0 tutorial, but we simplified some of the trigger events and I want to show you how to use them. Let's start by creating a new blueprint actor. And in order for this to work, you now have the component trigger. And the component is basically listening to all the triggers. Here you can define that it should listen to trigger single or trigger constant. And if you don't know what this is doing, just have a look at the previous tutorial about triggers because all this information is still valid. And actually in this setting, everything from the last tutorial works the same way. So if this is set to custom, it will still use the interface listen to trigger like in the last tutorial, but you need to add this component to your actor for it to work in 2.1. First of all, let's have a look at our presets we created for you to make things a little bit easier. So if you open this up, you can see we have an open, a light, and an active. And first of all, let's talk about the light one. So the light one is basically for all actors that should toggle a light on and off. And in order for this to work, we first of all, of course, need to have a light here. So let's add a point light here and give it some color. Turn down the intensity because I don't want to use this. I want to use our new component light for this. And here in the component light, you can define how strong the light should be. So for example, let's make it over 9000 and from the beginning it should be off. And here I have my trigger type light, so this should already work and we don't have to do anything else. So let's try it out. Let's drop it into the scene here. And in order for this to trigger, I'm just going to use this button here because he's already triggering all the actors to trigger here. So right now he's just opening the door, but I can add a new element and select my newly created light actor. Now if I hit the play button, you can see the door is being opened and also my light is turned on and off. And the cool thing is you could completely change this here in the component light. So for example, let's increase the duration to maybe 1 second and save this. And everything else is handled by the component itself. So you really don't have to do your own things for lights. So let's try it out. You can see now we have a nice transition over 1 second. And we can also, let's duplicate this here. And don't forget to add it to the trigger. And now if we hit play, the door will open and both of the lights will be triggered. So this is the first type. Let's create a new one and let's call it Cube Magic. For this, I'm going to add a simple cube here. Let's make it a little bit smaller, so maybe something like 0.4, 0.42. That's the right value actually. I'm also going to add my component trigger, and this time I'm going to use the open functionality. Select the open, and again, like I did previously with the light, If I select the open, I need to add the component open for all the settings. And here in the component open, I can, first of all, let's open up the name here. And this is the same logic we use for the component visual, where we change textures or static meshes, things like this. We need to define a tag for which this will actually be applied. So let's take the tag cube. And now I'm going to select my cube here, scroll all the way down until I found the tags and add a new tag here, copy in the cube. So now with this, the component actually knows what to rotate or move or open. Let's open it up. And first of all, we can define a range. So with a min and max value, let's increase this, maybe do 200. And I want, first of all, I'm going to show you the transform. So you can say, I want to transform this object on the X, Y, or Z axis. Let's do the X axis. Also, we have this duration. So let's again do 1 second. We can choose from different curves like linear, ease in, ease out, both of them. So the X axis is in this direction here. I'm also going to add it to my button. And now if I press the button, you can see the cube is being translated on the X-axis. And you can select another axis here. You can also select like the X, Y, and Z axis all together. So this would look something like this. With this, you can actually do a very simple trigger setup where you can move the object in a direction. We also have implemented things like angular, where you can rotate it. So for example, I want to rotate on the Z-axis for, let's say, 90 degrees. And if I hit play, you can see now the cube is rotating. And one thing to keep in mind is that he's always rotating around its own pivot point. So if you want to rotate it around this axis, you would need, maybe let's open, there is a door in there. I'm going to show you with this door here. You can see the pivot is here at this edge. So if I play with this selected, that now my door is rotating. And I can go in there and say, okay, I want maybe like 270 degrees over something like 5 seconds. And now the door will open much slower. And I can go in there and close it again. And the last thing would be the scaling. So we can say, okay, we want to scale from 1 to maybe 2 on all axes over 2 seconds. And now the mesh would scale. So let's see. So these are the presets. You can also go in there and, for example, select the active. We use this, for example, in our TV, so you can just have a look on how this is set up, but it's basically all the same logic behind it. So I'm not going to talk about this now. If you set this to custom here, let's compile it. Then you have the possibility to add the interface listen to trigger, like in the previous tutorial. And now you can use the event interface trigger signal to implement your very own logic. For example, I can just do a simple print string here. And now I don't need this component light here. I have my component trigger. It's set to custom. So if this is set to custom, it will use the interface, listen to trigger, and whatever you do here, this will happen. So right now it's very simple. I have two lights, so I should see 2 times I'm a light. And you can see both of them triggered the custom event here. So and now you could go in there and really do your own magic. One question we got from Ed from our community was if it is possible to use a trigger to actually trigger itself. Going to show you how you would do this. So you can go in there, and basically this is a very simple task. So I use this. Right now there is no functionality in there. Let's also use the interface trigger signal and also do a print called I triggered myself. Do we have an explosion in here? Yes, awesome. So let's make it a little bit interesting. So I triggered myself, and after that I want to spawn an emitter at location, want to get a location of the button, and spawn this explosion preset there. And I also just want to do this if the trigger is actually set. So you can just right click here and split the struct, or you could go in there and break it yourself. I like to do the first one, so I'm just going to split it. And I only want to execute the explosion once this is actually set. And just as a reminder, here you can see that we have 2 sections, one is set and one is none. So basically everything is set up for some great explosions in there. And there's one thing missing, because right now, as you remember here, we always defined what actor to trigger. So in this case, we triggered something like the door. So in this case, we want that this actor is basically just triggering itself. So very simple, we add a new component and add itself to the list of and add itself to the list of actors to trigger. And now prepare yourself for some amazing explosions. And you can see only if the button is really set, the explosion is happening. And also my tag I triggered myself just worked fine. And we could also go in there and do like a lot of these buttons and say that this trigger here should trigger this one and this one and this one and this one. And you know what? You should also open the door and open this door, turn on the lights, but not this one, no. What we should see is actually a lot of explosions, some lights, the door opening, and yeah, let's see if everything is set up correctly. So thanks for watching, and see you in the next tutorial.